Hey everybody, Brigham with Drift here. I know most of you follow the channel for snowboard reviews. This video is going to be all about the product behind those reviews. I'm going to explain why we think you should choose drift boards over a split board if you're looking to earn some turns. Now, if you only ride the resort, this might not seem of interest, but I do have to say, if you want to experience the very best that snowboarding has to offer, at some point you're going to want to look beyond the lifts. And that's what we're here for. Now, on the topic of splits versus drifts, you might be thinking, that guy's biased, and we can get that out of the way right now. I am. But we see a lot of opinions out there from people who've never used drift boards. And so there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of misconceptions floating around, and we just want to clear some of that up. For example, just the other day, I was climbing outside a local resort and there was a snowboarder coming down the hill the other way. He saw me and he stopped to specifically ask me about the drift boards, and we talked for a little bit and he was like, yeah, I've seen them. They look awesome, but I just bought a split because I know the drift boards don't really work outside of the side country. And that's the kind of thing we hear. We don't know where that comes from, but it's just not true. These things were born and raised in the Utah backcountry. And we just want to be really clear, after 8 years in business, shipping thousands of these all over the world and putting in well over 1 million vertical feet ourselves, pushing the limits of the drift boards, seeing what they're capable of, we've reached a point where we're comfortable tackling any climb that anyone else would reasonably be doing on skis or a split board. So that's where we're coming from. Now, split boards, they've been the status quo for how to snowboard in the backcountry for a really long time. And we know it's a bold claim to say that we have a legit alternative. And I'm not saying that split boards don't work. They obviously do. But there are some real downsides to splits that are often overlooked. And there are also some really compelling reasons to take a hard look at our approach skis for backcountry travel. I also want to make it clear up front, it's okay if you feel differently than us or if you've had a different experience. Backcountry travel is nuanced. It involves a lot of personal preference. Backcountry gear is often all about trade-offs, and your preferences might be different than ours. Sometimes we even get people who seem to feel threatened by the idea that their expensive split board may not be the best tool for the job every time. There's no need for that. We haven't tried every piece of equipment. We haven't been in every possible situation. But we do have years of experience testing and comparing against skis and split boards. We know what the drift boards are capable of, and we know the pros and cons, especially compared to splits. Finally, please know we wouldn't sell drift boards if we didn't love snowboarding and believe in our product. We hope our passion and our love for snowboarding comes through in the things that we're doing, because for us, that's really what it's all about. Now, let's get into those details. The first major benefit is that with drift, you can ride any snowboard you want in the backcountry. It's hard to overstate how awesome it is to be able to ride the very best board and the very best bindings in the backcountry regardless of the conditions. Split boards may ride better than ever, but solid boards and normal bindings are just better. And let me be really plain about this. Imagine a magical genie takes you to the top of a private mountain covered in perfect snow. And he says, it's all yours, and you can pick from any snowboard in the world to ride down it. He shows you all the POW boards, all the free ride boards, all the options. And then he's like, hey, we also have these boards that have been cut in half lengthwise. And then we hold them together with your bindings and a couple clips. Do you want to use one of those? And you'd be like, no thanks. It's hard to improve a snowboard by cutting it in half. Split boards are extra heavy, they have weird flex patterns, and they have to function uphill and down. And so to do that, they have to make compromises. With drift boards, we separate the uphill and the downhill by using two different tools. Each one's 100% optimized for their job. I'm obviously a little extra with trying all the different boards. You don't have to get that crazy. Even a small quiver opens up a world of options in the backcountry compared to a single split. My favorite thing is being able to ride the best powder shapes in the world on those special deep days. I love that. But I also really love being able to use an old beat up board in early season snow, carving board in spring corn, or even like a freestyle twin if you're out building jumps and just messing around. Second major benefit is that drift boards are crazy light on your feet, making them very efficient for traveling uphill. The details of touring efficiency can get pretty tricky depending on fitness, body type, terrain, conditions, and gear. But we found in general, the less weight on your feet, the better. Splitboard and ski brands know this. That's why they're always trying to make boards and bindings lighter, but the lightest split setups are extra expensive. They're still heavier than drifts. They tend to be fragile, and they usually don't descend as well as normal boards. Drift boards, 2.5 pounds per foot. It's actually lighter than some snowboard boots. Light enough, it almost feels like there's nothing there. But when you add up the weight of a whole split setup with the skis, bindings, skins, pucks, and hardware, it's very normal to be carrying 6, 7, even 8 pounds or more on each foot. Here's what that difference looks like. It's a big difference. You can definitely feel it in your legs. Now, you do have to carry that snowboard weight either way. We just found we're a little faster with the weight on our back rather than having it on our feet, especially if we're really moving uphill. Pulling that weight uphill with your legs, step by step, takes a toll over time. And again, we've tested this over tens of thousands of vertical feet with skiers and with split boarders. We've found that we either keep up or often move faster than skis or splits in a typical skin track. So maybe there's a concern that the guy on drift boards is going to get left behind. It's not accurate. He might actually pass everybody else. But while we're on that topic, I should point out here, no matter what gear you have, earning your turns is hard work. Fitness is really what determines how fast you are. And if you're just getting started, give it some time, keep at it. It's worth it. You'll get stronger. You might even get to the point where you enjoy climbing as much as you do descending. It sounds crazy, but it does happen. The third big benefit is that with drift, you don't ever have to remove, fold, store, pull apart, or install skins. This feature is so nice. If you run into a gear problem with your split board in the backcountry, there's a good chance it's because of your skins. Whether the glue has gotten icy and won't stick to the skis, or the glue's transferred to the base and now the board won't slide, or one of the clips is broken off, or your hands are just freezing cold and it's miserable to deal with it at all. Messing with skins is probably my least favorite thing about split boarding. Folding them, pulling them apart, keeping them clean, drying them, storing them. It's all just extra work and annoyance, and they're super expensive. Now, we use the same type of skin as everybody else, nylon or mohair, but the glue is semi-permanent. It's not meant to be removed, so we don't even think about the skins. They're always there, they're always ready, they always work. They're just really easy. The fourth big benefit of drift boards is that they're much cheaper than a split setup. If you have a snowboard already, you can start earning your turns for under $500. Now, I know that's not nothing. Drift boards actually aren't much cheaper to make than a normal pair of skis. I wish they could be cheaper, but in comparison at full price, a good split board plus the skins, bindings, and pucks is usually going to be 3 times that much, a lot of times even more. So that's why many riders only have one split board, and it's really expensive to build a quiver. And if you buy a split board and you don't love how it rides, it's kind of just too bad for you. But with drift, you open up the backcountry to powder boards, pow surfboards, everything else you can imagine. Solid boards are always cheaper, whether you're buying new or used, and you always have more options for additional shapes, sizes, brands. When you factor in our money-back test period, it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know of a split company that offers money back if you don't like your board, but you can try drift for 7 days and you can return them if you're not stoked. And honestly, we can offer this because hardly anybody ever sends them back. The fifth benefit is the quick transition. If you're doing a big tour with only one transition at the top, this isn't a huge deal. But when it matters, drift boards transition faster than everything else. And that's because you just swap the skis and your snowboard on your back, and that's it. This is especially convenient if you're doing multiple laps with multiple transitions. that transition time adds up. I love doing big long tours, but sometimes the best option is to track out a smaller slope with a few laps. And we've noticed we're happy to do that, where others will dismiss it because of how much time they'll spend transitioning back and forth. It's also really nice if you ever have to transition back to skin mode on an exit, especially if you're with skiers who are typically impatient with split boarders. In the end with drift, you'll transition faster than anybody else in the crew. You might get beat by a skimo guy in spandex and a cycling helmet, but even then, there's a good chance you'll be faster. The last benefit is the overall simplicity. Drift boards are just way simpler than a split setup. There's just not a lot that can go wrong. I've actually never had a mechanical failure with drift, which is kind of crazy if you consider how much I've used them. You make sure the bolts are tight every now and then, and that's about all there is to do. But I can't say the same for a split setup between the skis, clips, pucks, skins, and ultralight bindings with a lot of moving parts. If you go on the Reddit Splitboard forum, there are countless threads addressing one gear problem or another, and almost all of those vanish when you're using drift boards. Split boards are great if you love to fiddle with stuff. They're a gearhead dream, and as a gearhead myself, I get that appeal. But if you want something that is just fast, simple, and reliable, drift boards are the trick. So those are the major benefits that we wanted to address. There are a lot of other little ones that pop up. An interesting thing that you find in the backcountry is that if there's a downside to something in one situation, there's usually a corresponding upside in a different situation. We see a lot of those little unique benefits with drift as we've compared them to skis and split boards. Now, let's get into those downsides. First, with our system, you do always have an extra piece of equipment on your back. As mentioned earlier, carrying your snowboard on your back is actually very efficient, but there may be some situations where you know you don't want anything else back there. We think it's worth it for all the benefits listed earlier, but we get it if you feel otherwise. Now, if you're worried about the weight of the drift boards on your back while going downhill, I would just say that if you're wearing a typical avalanche pack full of typical gear, the drift boards don't add a whole lot. If you subtract the weight of skins that you'd be carrying with split boarding, you're looking at maybe a little bit over 3 pounds extra. For me, I can tell the difference between snowboarding with no pack and an avalanche pack, but I don't really notice a difference between snowboarding with an avalanche pack and an avalanche pack with the drift boards. Second downside, drift boards are most at home in skin tracks, and in some conditions they do sink further into soft snow than a longer ski. Now, we break trail all the time. We're happy to do it. That's usually how you get the best snow, but longer skis can have an advantage. I should mention though, breaking trail in deep powder is hard, whatever you're using, and a heavy flexi split ski is also not fun to lift out of deep snow. At least with drift boards, because they're so light and they're so stiff, they are a little bit easier to lift up, even if they do sink a little further. In the end, huge shout out to everybody who puts in skin tracks. It's not easy, but that deep snow is why we're out there in the first place. The last downside is that drift boards tend to have less edge hold in firm snow compared to most splits. Some people think this is because we don't do metal edges, but that's false. Metal edges are something we've researched extensively. We could add them. We actively choose not to. Edge hold is really about edge leverage and skin contact. We trade some edge leverage for float with our wide boards. You can see how far the edge is from the binding. That makes it hard to put weight down on that edge. The other factor is our minimalist binding. It doesn't provide a whole lot of lateral support, and so your boot can kind of roll in there, and that makes it trickier to leverage that edge as well. We do have our narrower Cascade model. These are made specifically for firm snow. They're a lot easier to leverage that edge because they're narrower. They work really well. But we did originally design drift boards primarily for powder, where edging isn't much of an issue, especially here in Utah. But now they get used in all types of conditions. So typically, if we run into a firm section, we will just take a more direct route up the hill. This works really well because it gives full skin contact, and because we have an extra tall hill riser and because the skis are so short, you can actually take drift boards up some surprisingly steep pitches that would be less comfortable on skis or splits. If the whole mountain is firm, we just use our ski crampon. We have one for both models. They work really well. We have done some pretty hefty spring tours on firm snow. So you can see from these pictures, this is 14,000 foot Mount Shasta in California. On tours like these, we've found we usually transition to a ski crampon when anybody else would. And if necessary, we transition to a boot crampon when everybody else does as well. Speaking of our binding, I do want to address some misconceptions there. Some see our binding, they think it's kind of ghetto, assuming we just can't make anything more fancy, more like a snowboard binding. But those already exist. We didn't really feel the need to reinvent them. The truth is, everything about this binding is engineered and designed intentionally to be as simple, light, and fast as possible. They're quick, they're easy, they're affordable, they don't break, they lay flat on your back when it's time to descend, and they're really comfortable. Now, some of our customers do run split binding on the drift boards. You can see that here with the Spark R&D setup. They can provide a little bit more edge hold, and they do reduce the overall weight of what you're carrying. But there are a couple trade-offs. They add a lot to the overall cost. They do take a little longer to transition, and the extra edge hold isn't way better just because no snowboard binding was really ever designed for lateral stability. So your foot can still roll a bit in there. Ski boots and skis have a huge edge in this area. But if you're interested, the step-on split is actually our favorite. It provides the best edge leverage of anything we've used because of the way that it anchors your foot back here by the Achilles tendon and up here by each of your toes on the sides. Beyond that, you're going to need to get into like a hard boot setup. The other trade-off with split bindings is that the increased support means less comfort. With our binding, the minimalist straps act a little bit like suspension. They allow the board to move under your foot a bit and just adapt to the variations in the terrain. Stiffer split bindings hold everything a little more firmly, including the board, so those variations in the terrain, they're sent up into your knees and your hips to deal with. So I use drift bindings as often as possible. I just find that they're faster and they're more comfortable. But we're always scheming ways to improve edge hold. We'll see what the future brings. For us, the edging issue is probably the one that we think about the most. Lastly, we see comments often, the drift boards are great, but they're only for short tours. And we're not really sure where this idea comes from. We regularly do thousands of vertical feet at a time with zero issues. I'm not really sure what a short tour is anyway. It's all relative from person to person. But if you're curious, here are a few typical tours from the last couple seasons for us. We are getting to be old men. We have families. We're definitely nothing special, but we do like to push it a little bit. I try to hit at least 1,000 feet of vert every time I go out, but I often do 3,000 to 5,000 on the weekends. And a couple times a season, we'll go really big, get into the 6,000 or 7,000, 8,000 foot range on a single tour. The drift boards can go as big as you want. The real question is, how long can your lungs, your legs, and your family handle you being out there? And by the way, if you want to get a better feel for the sort of terrain and the tours that we're doing, check out our Instagram. We put a lot of stuff up there. Right now, the edge of our experience with pushing the limits of the drift boards is into the realm of more serious splitboard mountaineering, steeper, icier terrain. We've dipped our toes into it, but there is more to explore there. The reality is, like most of our customers, we're usually in safer, more average terrain. We're hunting for that soft snow. We want those pow turns. And this is really the bread and butter for drift boards anyway. It's where they shine the very most. Whatever your goals are, we encourage you to take a hard look at drift before you drop your money on a split setup. Check out the reviews, find out for yourself. Again, we offer a money-back test period, so you really have nothing to lose. If you already have a split board, don't be afraid of these. Consider how drift approach skis could expand your options in the backcountry. They're not a threat. Have an abundancy mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. The way I see it, if you love snowboarding, you should have a set of drift boards. They're just another tool that's going to expand your options. When I first saw drift boards years ago, I was skeptical. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and we still get that a lot. They're just unique enough that it's hard for people to know exactly what they're looking at. But then I tried them, and they legit changed my life. Dave and I have been earning our turns since we were little kids, boot packing all over the Utah hills. And that was over 30 years ago, but drift boards have opened up a whole new world of snowboarding for us. And it has been so fun to be a part of that and to share it with others like you. So all that said, the last thing I need to mention is that the risks of the backcountry are real. If you're going to venture into avalanche terrain, please do it with the proper training, the proper equipment, the proper people. We love backcountry snowboarding. None of it would be worth the life of even one of our customers. So please be safe and have fun out there. And we really do believe, because this is how we try to do it, you can enjoy earning your turns without serious risk if you do it right. Now, if you made it this far, huge thank you for watching. Hit me up below with your comments or questions. I'm pretty sure I've climbed more vertical with drift boards than anybody else on the planet, so I should be able to help if you need anything, and we'll see you in the next video.